All right, all kids gotta eat, but sometimes it's just not that easy. I am Coach Jason from Adaptive Movement. I'm joined here today with Brittany Shapiro, a registered dietitian. Hello, Brittany. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of your background. I'll do a little James Lipton here. Where were you born? Start with that.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Maryland. So I'm from the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. Went to the University of Maryland for college, so I never left. And I trained to be a registered dietitian at the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. And ever since I worked over at Children's National Hospital for about 8.5 years. And I started this practice on the side, which a couple months ago, I am now doing this full time.
Awesome. It's exciting stuff. So I can't wait to find out more. So let me just go with this next here. You're a registered dietitian and you're a pediatric registered dietitian as well. So what is a registered dietitian or a nutritionist? Let's start with that.
Yeah, great question. So that's definitely something that confuses a lot of people because really anyone can call themselves a nutritionist these days. You don't really have to have a special degree. Maybe you took some courses or something, but a licensed registered dietitian is someone that has had a degree in dietetics, and then they went on to do a full training program in order to actually get the registration and sit for an exam. So it's a very structured degree with license to practice nutrition and to guide patients who may be dealing with different disease states or medical problems where they need some guidance on their nutrition.
Awesome. Okay, great. Because, I'm a fitness trainer and I took nutrition courses as part of my continuing education to become a nutrition coach to help the clients meet their goals. But it's very clearly laid out, different scope of practice, different thing entirely. You're not a registered dietitian, not a nutritionist. I wouldn't call myself that. I mean, I would say a nutrition coach.
Mm-hmm.
But so what are some of the things briefly that is a difference between what you could do as a dietitian versus someone else who is a nutrition coach?
Yeah, great question. So I think the main difference is that when there are medical problems involved, whether it's diabetes or, obesity with, high blood pressure or problems with your kidney, things like that, food allergies. These are things that you really want to look to a registered dietitian to give you guidance because they have that medical background.
Exactly. Thank you. All right. So, and you're a pediatric registered dietitian. So you've just you talked about your own practice here, which is very exciting. And what kind of problems do you help people solve in your practice?
Yeah, good question. So I see a lot of different things. The kids that I work with are, ranging from babies all the way to kind of college age. So in the little ones, it might be problems with learning to eat and not growing well,
Mhm.
or definitely those food allergies in the babies and even in the older kids. I can help kind of work with the allergist to help figure out what can the child eat if they feel like there's so many things that they can't eat and make sure that they're meeting all of their needs despite their limited diet. Um, in the toddlers, I help with a lot of picky eating where the kids only want to eat, a couple different fruits or, very limited vegetables or maybe like two protein foods and kind of how to work with the whole family to get the variety increased and just get those family meals working a little bit more easily. And then, I see older kids that also have problems with growth, maybe growing too quickly or growing too slowly, and just kind of helping make sure they are meeting all of their nutrition needs. I see a lot of problems with stomach problems like GI
Mm.
stuff, whether it's constipation or whether it's just irritable bowel syndrome or Crohn's disease or celiac disease with a gluten-free diet. So that's just kind of like touching on the main things that I see, but a lot of different issues in the pediatric population specifically.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like it can really vary, case by case. So you mentioned allergies, growing too much, not growing enough, other issues like so gut health. Actually, that's my major topic there. I love talking about the gut, and like Hippocrates said, all disease comes in through the gut. So it's been fascinating journey to study that. So, but now there are so many kids, adults too, but we're focusing mainly on the kids today that have these digestive issues. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's many factors affecting it, and really, I'm not the only person kind of working on the team. I always like to stress that there's so many different members that are important to support these kids that are dealing with GI problems, especially the pediatrician and the GI doctor, and they might have a therapist, some kind of psychologist to work on how the gut is connecting with the brain, because that is really, really important. And then, the foods that are affecting how the child's feeling. And in your role, the movement that actually is so crucial in that whole connection. So I think that these are kind of all related to the fact that there's so many factors. It's the stress and anxiety that kids are experiencing that can directly affect those GI symptoms. It can be the foods, whether the kid is maybe eating a lot of very greasy foods or a lot of very sugary foods that are maybe they're having problems digesting, or maybe they're just not eating enough during the day and then kind of eating a lot all at once, maybe like the schedule around the meals. And a lot of kids are also not moving their bodies, and then things are kind of sitting there and not getting a chance to kind of move through more easily with that movement. So I think there's so many factors, and of course the allergies and actual like disease states that could be affecting it too. So many factors, needing all the support from different ends is crucial.
Yeah, it's fascinating how it's all connected together there. Everything you're eating, everything you're drinking, your movement, and, even just sitting around, like your muscle mass, if you've got it or don't have it. And even sleep, right? Is there a connection there between the gut and sleep?
Oh yeah, 100%. I forgot to mention the sleep one. The sleep and the hydration like are hugely important. So yeah, it is all the things. And I think a lot of us will want to find like a quick fix of like, which food should I take out of my diet? But really, it's not necessarily going to be this one factor. It's going to be all the different things put together. Yep.
Okay, right. So all these different things put together. Got to hit this on multiple angles, and including your diet. Right? So, okay, solving these gut health problems, allergy issues, any other kind of issues that you kind of specialize in at the clinic you want to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that I really like about my role is just that collaboration. So, when it comes to maybe these picky eaters that are just only eating a couple foods, I'm really collaborating with the feeding therapists. So the therapists that are working hands-on with helping the kids learn to eat more variety, and I'm kind of helping coach the families along and making sure that we're meeting the needs. And then with the GI and the allergy, I'm working, really closely with the families and with the doctors. And then with someone like you as a coach, and the kid is trying to either meet their goals for maybe a sport related nutrition questions, or maybe those weight concerns, that's where I work very collaboratively too. So I think just kind of that collaboration is key.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm really glad to have you here, working with other people, with other specialties, other scopes of practice, so we could kind of hit it, excuse me, from all angles, to help the families there. So multifaceted problem. You mentioned variety in the foods that we eat. This is like a lifelong battle. I find myself still working on, certain foods that I know I didn't like them when I was a kid. Now I'm like, oh, wow, okay, it tastes a little bit different now. I can eat more of it than I used to, but I really didn't like it. Had certain things like that I didn't want to eat as a kid. But why is that so important? And, why does that become too restrictive, you know, when they become extra picky. Like I had some things I just didn't want to eat, but it wasn't that extreme, right? Where some kids, as far as I'm understanding, maybe you've seen this, where they eat the same foods
Mhm.
over and over again. But why is variety really important?
Yeah, and so I think in these kind of like picky eaters that we see a lot, it might be due to a couple reasons. It might be due to maybe there's like some weaknesses in the mouth and maybe chewing can be hard. And so they want to avoid certain textures that are really hard to manage. Or it might be there are some sensory barriers. And so it's certain textures of food or certain kind of looks of food that might turn them off from it. And so that limits them more. Or it might just be kind of the behaviors around the meal times and stress and anxiety around that. So I think that whenever it comes to kind of that picky eating, the variety is hugely important for many reasons. I would say, number one, when we are eating kind of the same very limited diet, we are only getting those vitamins and minerals, and maybe we're not getting much fiber from those foods, right? And also the biggest thing that I see is as we get really tired of the same foods. And so if I had peanut butter and jelly every single day for 3 years, I wouldn't want to look at it again. And so you see actually that what happens is if we continue to give the same foods, the child and even the adult, gets sick of them and never wants to see them, and then they drop it off, and then there's even few foods left in the list.
Mm,
So trying to kind of keep the child as flexible as possible, whether it's changing up the brand of the yogurt that they usually buy, or maybe instead of peanut butter today, we're going to try almond butter, right? Or, instead of, ground beef, we're going to try chopped up steak or something like that. So just really changing the brand of the food, the way it's presented, the type of the food, and that will help with the flexibility, giving different kinds of vitamins and minerals from the food, hopefully getting in more fiber from there, and making sure that they add more and more instead of dropping food.
exactly. That's what I was just thinking there. So we want to keep it expanding
Mm-hmm.
out with varieties, right? You're expanding the horizons here. You don't want to be contracting and living in like a smaller and smaller little bubble
Mm-hmm.
of foods that you're eating.
Mm-hmm.
And just reminds me again of the gut that we were talking about and the microbiome, you know, where you want to be feeding them what they want to eat, right? So you can have that healthy microbiome, you know, that we all have inside of us, which I just find endlessly fascinating. So we want to eat for variety. And then also you mentioned fiber is really important, right?
Yeah.
So do you think are we getting enough fiber? Are people eating enough?
Nah, pretty much most people are not getting enough fiber. And I think it does three different things. Like a lot of us think fiber helps with the digestion, the moving food through the body easily, so that we can, go to the bathroom. But it also helps to definitely with our heart health and cholesterol levels for sure. And then the last but probably most important thing is it helps keep us satiated and feeling full and satisfied after the meals. And so that way, if we're having a piece of wheat toast or some oatmeal for breakfast, we're not going to be looking for a snack after an hour. We might feel satiated to, wait an extra hour from there. So I think that is very, very important.
Right. Yeah. Incredibly important point, right? So what you're eating will greatly determine how full you're going to feel, right?
Mhm.
I think we're all familiar with like when you start one or two potato chips or Oreos, I could
Mhm.
finish the whole thing. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
It's not a problem for me. Believe me, I can do that. Ice cream, this pint of ice cream, not a problem. I'll take care of that,
Mhm.
right? I'm not feeling full. I'm not feeling satiated, sated. What is it?
Yes, satiated from those foods.
Satiated.
They don't have a lot of fiber. They've got no protein. So yeah, they're not going to really serve us for a long time.
Exactly. Okay. Fiber and protein, right? So it'll be something you'll feel differently. You will feel fuller and more satisfied depending on what you're eating,
Right. Exactly.
right? Exactly. So sometimes, you know, so the feelings can be almost like misguiding us
Mhm.
sometimes, right? If I'm just eating you know, junk food or something like that, I'll never feel full. I'll always feel like I want to have more, you know,
Mhm.
especially maybe if I had everybody likes pancakes for breakfast, something like that. And now it's like an hour later, I'm hungry again.
Right. And the key
Right.
with all of that really isn't, and I'm a big fan of all foods fit into the diet. There's no bad foods,
Yeah.
there's no things we need to stay away from, but it's about how we include it in part of the balanced meal. And so if we want pancakes, absolutely, pancakes are an excellent grain food, right? And ideally, if they're wheat pancakes, even better, right? They've got more fiber. But the key is, how do we pair it with something that has protein to then serve us for longer and keep us feeling satisfied? And so that would be having it with a glass of milk or putting some peanut butter on top of it, or maybe some yogurt on the side. But definitely pancakes alone would not actually build that balanced meal that we're looking for.
Right. Right. Exactly. Balance. That's the key. So getting it in balance, getting it proportional. So you get the right nutrients, you'll feel fuller, and the variety there, it'll feed your gut. So you'll get the benefits all around. Okay. So let's take it into another area here. Let's say if we busy families all over, they got to pick up food, got to feed the family. So let's say they're going into the grocery store.
Mhm.
So what would Brittany do in the grocery store? Can you help us out here? Because it's like overwhelming. Honestly, I'll just put it that way, right? There's tons of stuff in the grocery store. So how do we handle that?
Yeah, I could just spend an hour in like the yogurt section alone because it's so overwhelming. So definitely, I think I want to start off that question by something that I see a lot of times being kind of problematic in the family dynamics around feeding is just that relationship of the parent's role versus the child's role in eating. And I really like to make sure that's clear for families. The parent's role is to prepare nutritious foods, and to serve them at a regular meal and snack schedule, right? So that means going to the grocery store, doing some of the cooking. Of course, if the child's older and can help, even better. And making sure there are regular chances in the day to eat every about 3 hours or so. The child's role then from there is to decide if they're going to eat or not and how much they want to eat of the foods that the parents are providing. But it's really not a free for all for the child to get to say, oh, I didn't like that was on the menu, I want this instead, or to go in and grab 10 snacks, between when they get home and when it's dinner time. So, I really enforce this the kitchen is closed policy. And so as long as the kitchen is open, about every 3 hours for a meal or a snack, and then, closed in between, I think it's crucial. So now that we kind of know the relationship and whose job is what, when it comes to grocery shopping, I definitely recommend kind of coming prepared, right? So taking inventory of the house, see what's already there, meal plan a couple meals for the week to have an idea of what you need to get to kind of fill in the gaps. And then, of course, once you've got kind of the basics that you need for the week, really trying to challenge yourself in the fruit and vegetable aisle. What fruits did you grab last week? What can you grab this week that's different to add more variety? Red apples are a favorite in the house. Don't buy them every week because that reinforces the lack of variety in terms of the colors of the apples, or even getting pears sometimes or bananas. So really switching up the type of fruit and vegetable. And if your kid is with you, then let them pick out the new one that they want to bring home for that week. The same when it comes to the dry goods, right? So this is, Cheerios is maybe the go-to cereal, but switch it up, bring home something else, the next week, and then something else the week after. So as much variety as we can, within the limits of, the grocery store and, what we think our child is capable of doing to be challenged.
Right. Fantastic. So first understanding the roles here. I love that. So you're saying the parents, they're buying the foods, they're preparing the foods, offering the meals at mealtime, the snacks at snack time. And then if it's not mealtime, not snack time, the kitchen is closed.
Yeah.
Kitchen
Not a
is
restaurant.
closed.
Not a
It's
restaurant.
it's not open 24/7. Exactly. I love that as well. Um, I have that same kind of attitude with all sorts of things, right? Basically, it's like a store, the store is closed. So, all right, even if you have the money, you can't buy what you want to buy, just not right now. Right.
Exactly.
So timing is also really important, is what it sounds like.
Yes, hugely important. Every 2 to 3 hours, but not in between.
But not in between, right? So maybe we're snacking a little too much in between, especially if it always seems available, it's right there. Who knows? There could be a plate of cookies there. There could just be a whole box of granola bars there, right? So instead of having it seem available all the time at every whim, you would just grab it without even thinking about it. Kitchen's closed, kitchen's open. So
Yep.
that seems to clarify, that would help you clarify and really change the structure there of when you're eating. So any other stuff here in the grocery store, and you mentioned variety again as well. So we might buy a green apple, then a red apple, and maybe I always the one that I talk about is like try switching to a sweet potato instead of just all the regular potatoes, try the orange potatoes, try the Japanese sweet potatoes, try purple potato, something like that, or a yam, there's even more variety in the foods than we have in the grocery store, right? It's just wild, the variety of food that does exist, and yet we eat the same foods over and over again.
Right. I think
Right.
that the grocery store itself can be very overwhelming. And so we kind of just get in this routine of, oh, I got to pick up my same bread, my
Mm.
same yogurt, my same, fruit that I get all the time. And that just does a disservice to both our nutrient profile that we're taking in, but also can and reinforce the picky eating that we see in a lot of kids.
Right, exactly. Okay, so we've got the nutritional component, right? Your brain, your body, your hair, your skin is all going to be made out of these building blocks, and feeding the gut microbiome that we've been talking about. So you need the variety for that reason, but it's also behavioral, right? We have habits, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I just go in there and I buy the same Cheerios every time, I'm kind of like stuck in a rut there, going on autopilot. So in the grocery store, maybe we'll take a look around that item. What else is available? What is a variation on that? So we could just kind of switch it up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
uh, add a little bit of novelty to the food that we're eating. Right? We don't want to be stuck in a rut, which happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay, so there's a lot, and like you're saying, we could go on. We could do the whole thing about what we're going to do in the grocery store.
Yep.
I have no doubt. So there's a few basic guidelines there. I've also heard most of the healthy food is around the perimeter of the grocery store. Is that something you
Oh yeah,
believe?
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's where you find, right? We want to focus on the foods that don't have long ingredient lists and
Right.
are kind of like they don't even need a package because they're so fresh. So that would be the things like the fruits, vegetables, meats, fish, even things like milk and eggs, don't have long ingredient lists. And then all the things on the inside of the aisle are going to be the more processed foods. And so when we're thinking about, frozen foods, those frozen dinners, for example, would be potentially very high in sodium, right? And we definitely want to be mindful of that and make sure that they are balanced as well. But in terms of the fruits and vegetables, whether it's fresh, frozen, canned, they're actually all pretty much very similar in terms of their nutrition quality. It's really paying attention to the canned, making sure they don't have added sugars in them, but otherwise you're good to go, whether it's frozen, fresh, or canned. So yeah,
Right.
just paying attention to the frozen, the salt and that could be added, especially in some of those packaged dry goods as well, and canned stuff, salt and sugar.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, because some people, like, there's a myth there. I don't know where it came from, but some people think like if you froze these vegetables, they've been ruined, right? Like the nutritional value has been destroyed,
Mm-hmm.
but not
Mm-hmm.
really.
No,
It's fine.
no,
Right.
exactly.
And but the ingredients list. So last thing here before we kind of switch to another area, you know, we've got nutrition labels, you've got the ingredients list. I try to keep it in balance, at least like 4 out of 5 times is my goal in terms of trying to eat, healthy, nutritious food. Because I also have a sweet tooth. I've always had one. I like eating, all sorts of stuff like pancakes or muffins or whatever that I know it's not ideal, but it's a balance. So in the grocery store, everything's got that nutrition label. But then if you're looking at the fruits and the vegetables and the seafood and stuff like that, you look at the ingredients, there's literally one ingredient,
Mhm.
right? It's like ground beef. The ingredients include ground beef,
Mhm.
right? You pick up a head of lettuce, ingredients include lettuce. And that's literally it, right? It's carrots. Like what are the ingredients in a carrot? Carrot,
Mhm.
right? But you pick up a box of Pop-Tarts.
Right. Very well.
Ingredients don't just include Pop Tarts. We
Mhm.
got a
Mhm.
whole list of stuff that went in there. So just, being aware of that, just kind of taking a look, see what is going on with the ingredients list. That'll give you an idea. Is this like a natural, healthy kind of food that just comes out of the earth, or is it a processed food that was created, by this company to sell it to us? And, most of that stuff is going to be filling up those aisles, tons and tons, aisles and aisles and aisles in the center of the store. Um, More of the fruits and vegetables and the deli and, seafood market and stuff like that tend to be around the perimeter.
Mhm.
So now say you take your food, you go home, you're busy parents here. So let's say we're talking about dinner time, breakfast time, just cooking meals and snacks at home. Are there any sort of like best practices that we could recommend in general for in the home?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say a couple things. Like definitely when you come straight home from the store, see if you can do a little bit of that legwork right away, whether it's like washing off some grapes and putting them in a bowl so that they're easy to grab, or chopping up some carrot sticks so that they're ready to go to have with the hummus, right? So just kind of those easier grab and go things, so that you don't have to do the work later on. And then really mapping out, what the week looks like. I always like one of my goals for myself is to try to kind of prep one like breakfast food to have for a couple days in the week. So maybe that looks like making some egg cup muffins, or maybe that's making some pancakes that are really dense in nutrition, and then that can be enjoyed for kind of a couple days, or maybe an oatmeal bake or something like that. So, trying to do a little bit of prep in advance, and some meals, should be really low effort, and like you can build a balanced meal with frozen chicken nuggets, some sweet potato fries, and maybe some steamed broccoli, right? Like that can work for sure. And then other meals maybe are a little bit more involved, and it's like a stir fry with chicken and rice and vegetables or something like that. So definitely don't feel like every meal needs to be this like perfect looking thing. As long as it has a protein, a grain, and either a fruit or a vegetable, you're good to go.
Okay. Okay. Protein, grain, fruit or vegetable, and some prep work, right? I think that is key. I've, found that myself. It makes a huge difference. So you're ready. Um, okay. So really, really practical stuff there. Anything special with drinks or snacks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll touch on the snacks first. I think that the key with snacks is that just like meals, we want to make sure that they are satiating and they're going to give us the energy to last until the next meal. Otherwise, that's when you have your bag of chips and then you go back an hour later looking for something else. So with the snacks, really trying to also incorporate the protein, which we don't always think about. Some of us are like, oh, just grab a fruit for a snack. It's not enough, right? Especially if dinner's in 3 hours or 2 hours, that's not going to lead to they're going to be constantly snacking up until dinner. So an apple with peanut butter, or a yogurt with granola, or crackers with cheese, or potato chips with some turkey slices, right? Like just a way to kind of pair things together so you have that protein that's going to give you energy for longer. And then when it comes to drinks, I mean, I think we all know that there isn't really a place for juices and sodas anymore in our diet, and water is kind of the go-to. If we are relying on kind of those sugary drinks currently, then just really trying to set very strict limits to them of maybe every time we have juice, it's always mixed half and half with water. Or maybe we're limiting to one time a day, in a small cup or something like that. Or maybe there's some flavored waters that we can, look for to kind of enhance the taste. But really there's no room for anything else besides water on a day-to-day basis. And even the sports drinks, like the Gatorades and the Powerades. I think a lot of us think, oh, we're exercising, we better tack on a sports drink. Really the only time that those are needed is if someone is like doing kind of a marathon type exercise, like, 26 miles or more. And so if I see a kid is, having like multiple hours of intense sports or activities, then maybe it would be useful. But otherwise, it's not really helpful or necessary.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really glad we kind of touched base on that. I think that that's really common. People just think like, well, I'm going to gym class or I'm going to, do whatever. Like, I'm going to ride my bike. So I got to have some Gatorade or something. It's like, not really. You're going to be all right. Right. So some water is good and then some variety. So it's interesting. I didn't think of, you could have half water, half juice or something like that. I like to make, sometimes like plain like iced tea, something like that is an alternative, or even just like club soda. It's an alternative that, it's like soda, but it's water, I think that makes a big difference. Having lemon in the water, having lime in the water, other varieties like that, you can make it, spice it up here, make it interesting. But exactly, you don't want to be, drinking soda, drinking juice, drinking Gatorade, even like orange juice, people could easily be fooled into thinking that that's like me getting my fruits and veggies here. Like I'm getting the fruit, like it's going to boost my immune system, right? If I drink this like giant glass of orange juice, isn't that going to like make me like super strong and cure all my colds or something?
Right. I mean, you will definitely get the vitamins from there, but the problem is you are getting the concentrated sugars from the oranges. You probably need, 4 or 5 oranges to make a cup of orange juice. And so really it's just extracting the sugars from the orange juice and some of the vitamins. But you're leaving behind the most important part, which is the fiber, and that's what helps keep us feeling full for longer. And helps us to limit the amount of sugar we actually need to take in from the orange. So, we would never really sit and eat 4 to 5 oranges at a sitting. And so we don't really need to drink the juice for that same reason.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what's so funny. So it'd be better to actually eat an actual piece of fruit
Right.
than just, juice it. And, basically you're getting like all the part that's pure sugar. And when you're drinking the juice, you've removed the part that's actually more healthy for you, like that fiber,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you could eat the whole fruit, eat the orange or the pomegranate or whatever it is that you're going to eat. That'll be better for you than, some concentrated like orange juice or pomegranate juice or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So eat the real thing. So, all right. Lots going on there. So we start in the grocery store, at home. Um, and there's always plenty more we could do with this, talking more specifically about breakfast and then lunch, dinner, and snacks, and it goes on and on. But let's just do the last one here. Say we're going out to eat. Gotta go out to eat. We gotta go get a bite. So what would Brittany do here if we're in the restaurant, or, there's different types. There's fast food places, there's slow food places, there's sit down restaurants. What are a few basic guidelines for eating in the restaurant?
Yeah, great question. So I think it is great to be flexible around eating, sometimes in the home, sometimes out of the home, because that's just we want to. Eating is a very social activity, and we want to definitely be able to enjoy foods of all different sorts. One of the keys is making sure that we are eating on that regular schedule, even if we are really excited about the restaurant that we're going to for dinner, and we know we want to like enjoy it a lot. enjoying the food doesn't mean kind of overindulging in it to the point where, we have to eat double the portion that we would typically be comfortable with. And so in order to do that, I always say we want to stick to that schedule of eating every 3 hours, even if we're going to be planning on eating like a big meal later. So if dinner's going to be at 6 o'clock, a snack at 3, 4 o'clock is very appropriate, and making sure there is protein. That way, when you show up at the restaurant, ideally you can try to put together a balanced meal that has that protein, grain, and either fruit or vegetable. But we're able to kind of eat more mindfully. And so it's kind of enjoying one plate of food instead of, and maybe bringing home like this extra large portion for later, and we can enjoy the other half the next day. And maybe if dessert's part of the menu, we can split a piece of pie or something like that. But I think regardless, eating out isn't going to be as easy to control, is not, always as perfect as when we made our food at home. But just keeping that in mind, it doesn't have to be a perfect meal, or we can learn to be flexible, but making sure we're not showing up overly hungry, and that we're able to kind of think through the portion size and all of that.
Okay. All right. So we want to really think it through and be mindful with what you're eating. And of course, there's portions as well, because you're not really in control over the portion that they serve you when you order the food. They will give you whatever you've ordered and the portion that they've decided to serve.
Mm-hmm.
So, while you're eating, you mentioned also it's social, right? We're eating, spend time, really be present with your friends, your family. So it's better if you could eat with other people. That's even better, I would say, than eating alone. Especially you could eat at a real table. Better to do that than being stuck like eating in the car or by yourself somewhere. You got to do what you got to do. But if you could get together, right, that's even better, because eating is social. And when was it not social for human beings, right? We've always done that, right? We want to eat the meals together. We're social creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So then also being mindful, maybe I don't need to finish all of the food that they gave me right now, right? If I check in with myself and kind of slow it down, maybe I'm eating, I kind of take a pause, take a drink of water here. And then maybe you might even notice, depending on what you decided to eat, if it's got that healthy, balanced protein and fiber and stuff like that you've been talking about, you might even realize that you're kind of full, and you could take the rest home. You can have leftovers, have it tomorrow, have it later that night, but I think a lot of times we just don't really pause to even consider that. If it's right there, you will continue to eat, just like, the bag of potato chips or a box of Oreos or something like that. So that mindfulness component, I think, is really big. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Right. And I think, it's not always going to be perfect, and we don't have to beat ourselves up about it, because I think everyone overindulges, from time to time, and just kind of going into it with a very intentional mindset. So, if we ate 2 pieces of pizza and we're checking in with our body and we're like, I think we're kind of full, but that pizza was so good, and we just make the conscious decision that we want to have another piece. I think as long as we are really aware of what's happening, and we're not guilting ourselves about it or trying to make up for anything later on, I think that's really key in the whole kind of relationship around making good choices. So sometimes you might choose that third piece, and sometimes you might check in with your body and say, you know what, I feel satisfied and I'm going to eat the rest when I get home, for lunch the next day. So either way is a good choice, as long as we're being intentional.
That's perfect. Exactly. We want to make choices, right? We want to make our own choices. And then ultimately we're teaching the kids to make their own choices so they can become an adult,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Exactly. So even if you decide to eat a little bit more, at least you kind of thought it out and you made an active, intentional choice at that time.
Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that we are seeing these days, especially with parents, that can translate into stress around eating with kids, is just that really kind of restriction around food and how to handle that. And so I think just having that kind of all foods fit, neutral personality, and discussions around it. And that just mindfulness is crucial to avoid that kind of more disordered way of thinking around food.
Awesome. All right. So we're running out of time. So I just want to check with you and see if there's anything nutrition wise or about your practice as well that you'd like to mention here.
Yeah. So I think we just kind of like hit the very basics around things to think about with eating and your families. So I think my role, is if we implement some of these things and we feel like we're not quite getting the results that we want, or we just want a little bit more of that individual guidance. I am always happy to kind of set up those sessions with families. It can be this one-time thing. It can be, with regular follow-ups. But really my role is to kind of look at the big picture, look at the growth, look at any medical problems happening, and then look at what the families are eating day to day and really make adjustments to optimize growth, to make sure we're not missing any of those key vitamins or minerals, and then that we're eating the right balance of foods to really help us to thrive in all of our activities, whether it's school or the workouts that you guys might be doing, and how to feel best in terms of our gut health. So happy to help any families with that more individualized support.
Awesome. I love it. Okay. So where can people find you?
Yeah, so I am all virtual. So luckily that means I can support DC, Maryland, and Virginia families. So you can find me by reaching out on my website. My business is called Capital Pediatric Nutrition. And so can, look me up online, send me an email, pick up the phone, or send me a message through my website. And I'd be happy to kind of talk through whether a session might be an appropriate thing for your child or family.
Sounds perfect. Thanks for coming on today, Brittany. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.